Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Seed World Innovation webinar. I am Mark Zinkowitz, and I am Senior Editor with Seed World, and I'm happy to be your host today. Just to let you know, we are recording today's webinar, and it will be available on our website after the event. And also, if you have a question today, please just type it into the chat box at any time during the webinar. You don't have to wait until the end. If a question pops into your mind, just type it in and we will get to it at the end of the webinar. I just want to take a moment and thank our sponsor today, Tidal Grow Agriscience. Today's topic is Plan for the Planter, questions to ask when preparing next year's crop. And my guest today is Sarah Buddy Rodriguez. She is Agronomy Solutions Manager for Tidal Grow Agriscience. Sarah is a plant pathologist and a proud grad of North Dakota State University. She is passionate about tackling agriculture's ever-changing challenges, and she spent the past 5 years in the ag chem industry doing just that. She's now bringing her expertise to her role at Tidal Grow Agriscience, where she's excited to help drive innovation for farmers. Welcome, Sarah. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Mark, and thank you so much for the lovely introduction.
Not a problem. Well, thank you for your time. And I know this is a timely topic because where I'm based here in Manitoba, harvest is well underway. And in my particular neighborhood, things have gone very well. The cereals, canola are pretty much off the field. There's still some soybeans and sunflowers, things like that. But in my neighborhood anyway, the farmers are very fortunate and things are going well. But as you know, and I don't have to tell you that this is the perfect time of year for growers to be thinking ahead to the 2026 season. It's never too early to start planting. And so this is certainly a very timely topic. So Sarah, I am going to turn the floor over to you. So you now have the stage. Looking forward to your presentation. But if at any time you would like me to come back, just give me a shout out and I will reappear.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Sarah.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. As Mark said, my name is Sarah. I'm a Agronomy Solutions Manager for Tidal Grow Agriscience, and I am very excited to be here with you to talk about the plan for the planter and questions that you need to be asking yourself to be prepared for the next year's season. And as Mark was alluding to, you can never really plant the idea of getting your plants ready for the next year too early. So when getting prepared for the next season, there are so many factors that need to be considered. How did the previous year go? Was there any problems with disease or soil compaction? Maybe you tried out a brand new seed, and how did that turn out? Is the yield reaching what you want it to? Are you maintaining those high quality grains?
Are you still there, Sarah? You seem to have frozen.
Successful planting season, which will hopefully lead to a healthy and a bountiful harvest. There we go. So there are several questions that you need to ask yourself before the planting season even begins. Some of the questions that we may want to consider when we're thinking about preparing for the next year's crop would be, how quickly did these seedlings emerge? Was the emergence very uniform across the field? Did the seedlings show any signs of strong plant vigor? Did the soil temperatures impact the planting, or was there any other soil conditions that you may need to be concerned about when it comes to your planting timing? And was there any issue with last year's residue impacting your planting? So today we're going to be going a little bit more in depth into all of these questions, and the reason behind why asking them is going to be vital for preparing for the next year's season. So one thing to note is that there really is no single set of questions that need to be asked every single year consistently that's going to lead to a perfect harvest. There are always many questions that can be asked, and all are really important in their own way. And the importance of those particular questions may vary between farmer to farmer or even field to field within a farm system. So with the amount of research and the updates in technology that are coming out every single year, the need to evolve and develop these questions is imperative to having a successful year. So for instance, knowing whether or not to do soil testing, whether that's going to be in the spring or in the fall to make sure that everything is nice and level where you need it to be, if fumigation is needed, if there was any sort of a pathogen concern, needing to know whether or not you need to update your equipment or if it just needs some basic maintenance are all vital when it comes to being prepared for the next season. But understanding the why behind these questions is going to be very important when it comes to designing a very proper integrated pest management program and just getting prepared overall for the next year. Because planting and harvest are some of the most critical times for growers. So making sure that you're prepared for as many scenarios as possible is going to make it the most smooth and less stressful point of the season, especially when so many issues can throw it out of whack. So let's dive into one of our very first questions, which is, why do we need to be worried about how quickly did these seedlings emerge? So after planting has occurred, it's important to monitor the field to ensure that the seedlings are all emerging at roughly the same time and preferably as quickly as possible. And there are so many factors that can influence a seedling's emergence, such as biological, whether it's positive, such as waking up the soil microbiology and the bacillus that is going to be able to transform some of those nutrients into more bioavailable nutrients for the plant, or biological that could be negative, such as the introduction of any sort of damping off plant pathogens, such as Pythium, Phytophthora, Verticillium, or Fusarium. Environmental can also play in a key into whether or not the seedlings emerge. Let's say if we have a nice warm year and planting is that the weather has decided to warm up a little bit, the soil is at that right temperature, so you can plant maybe a week earlier than planned. Or the negative side, which is maybe Mother Nature decided that a second winter or that a longer winter may be necessary. And then finally, just some general planting practices, either positive or negative, which is maybe the grower decided to go no-till. Is that going to affect it in a positive way or in a negative way? Was the equipment maintained in a way where it's still going to be able to go out and plant productively? And poor emergence can lead to gaps in the field, reducing the number of those productive plants, as well as increasing the need for potential replant by the grower. So some of the things that we can do in order to encourage the seedling emergence is to ensure that we have a solid seed treatment program, as well as any sort of in-furrow applications of any nutrients that may be beneficial, or potential in-furrow pesticides if any plant pathogens are going to be of a concern. And these quick emergence can also be useful for reducing the amount of potential weed competition that may occur in the field, improving that overall plant vigor, better uniformity, which will eventually lead to a better yield. So this graph that you're seeing on the right showcases how some products can work together in order to increase the percentage of germination in the seedlings. On your x-axis, you have a product called Gen Boost, which we'll get into a little bit later in this presentation, your standard seed treatment program, and then a stacked program of the standard seed treatment program plus Gen Boost. And overall, what you're seeing based on the y-axis numbers, at 7 days, the Gen Boost and the standard seed treatment, both as solo applications, were lower at roughly 70 to 80% percentage of germination at 7 days, compared to the stacked treatment, where we have almost a 95% germination rate. And then once you look at the 11 days, the germination rate begins to level off closer to 95 to 100% for almost all of those treatments. Now, while 4 days difference may not seem like a lot, for a seedling, those 4 days that you're getting, those additional growing days where they're being exposed to the sun so they can begin to establish those stronger root systems and they can begin to establish their place in the field before weed seeds can get set in, before some other pathogens can start to attack. For instance, planting earlier in the season during those longer days can help plants such as soybeans produce more nodes and grow bigger, increasing their potential to produce more flowers and ultimately increasing the yield because early emerging seedlings have access to that available water and nutrient. In addition, by increasing the germination percentage by stacking these seed treatment products, you can ensure that you'll have a higher percentage germination, therefore getting a better investment in your seed and a stronger establishment of plants growing in your field. As you can see here on this graph, it's looking at very similar rates, specifically the percentage of germination and the speed to emergence between the Gen Boost, the standard seed treatment, and a stacked program of the standard seed treatment plus the Gen Boost. And overall, what we're seeing is that those stacked programs, especially when the products work synergistically, are able to increase that speed to germination and overall germination percentage much quicker than when it's applied as a solo. And especially for crops such as corn, early emergence leads to earlier tasseling, and this in turn results in a drier crop at harvest, which could save on drying costs and increase those profits over time. Now, I touched on it a little bit in the other slides, but while we're talking about the speed to emergence, crop uniformity is also extremely important for many reasons. And why do we need to look at uniformity across the field? Well, the first is that you know that your resources are being properly used. If micronutrients are applied too early or too late in the crop's life cycle, it could cause a potential lag in the yield, or it could potentially stunt the growth of your currently established crop. When it comes to applying foliar fertilizers or even pesticides, if certain areas of your field are slower and not at the same growth stage as some of the other areas in your field, you may not be applying these products at the proper time. And this can also reduce the need to go back and replant or having to add in any extra things into your field, such as starting fertilizers, herbicides, or any other having to run the planter back out again and potentially damaging those already established crops. Uniformity is also really important when it comes to managing the weed population. While weeds can be a major pest and concern in the field, if the seedling is already established and taking up that space, there's a lower chance that this is able to outcompete the weed for that space. Now let's talk about plant vigor. How can you start to look at what are some good signs of plant vigor in your field? Well, a vigorous plant stand from the beginning will set the foundation for a high yielding and resilient crop. When seedlings emerge quickly, grow uniformly, and develop strong and early roots, they capture that sunlight more effectively so that way they can outcompete those weeds and tolerate stress better. And established root zones can be important for many reasons, but the biggest is to ensure that they're able to reach out to collect those nutrients that it's able to utilize throughout the whole season in order to make it more resilient against biotic and abiotic stressors. For example, and I believe we talked about it earlier on, there are plant pathogens that can cause the disease damping off in a lot of seedlings. And by having a stronger plant vigor and stand establishment, the seedling should be able to withstand any potential attack from those damping off pathogens. Another example is any sort of abrupt changes in weather. If the seedlings were planted at the optimum time, but again, Mother Nature decided that winter is not going to end quite around that March-April time, then the seedlings, as long as they've had a proper time to establish and they have good plant vigor, should be able to withstand those abrupt environmental changes much better than their non-treated counterparts. And building early vigor isn't just about a good stand. It's an investment in the entire season's return. Strong early roots improve side dressing effectiveness. Healthy canopies can enhance the photosynthesis under that suboptimal light. And uniform crops can streamline that harvest operations, freeing up those resources for growers to focus on other fields that may need more attention or other tasks that may need to be focused on, so that way that they can be prepared for the next upcoming events. Some signs of plant vigor to look out for would be looking for those deep green and unblemished leaves, sturdy and straight stems, well-branched and extensive root systems, consistent leaf size and shape, and the absence of any sort of physiological disorders. Now, agronomists and researchers can also quantify this plant vigor by utilizing chlorophyll meters or SPAD readings in order to quantify those leaf greenness. Using root imaging platforms can also, or doing a root dig, can also give you a very good visual representation of how that root system is developing. And then finally, another way to quantify plant vigor is to do stand counts and emergence speed logs and compare them to the previous years in that same field location, or comparing field to field numbers to see how each of the fields are doing in their particular regions. So in this graph, on the y-axis, we're looking at root length in centimeters, and on the x-axis, we have your standard seed treatment. The standard seed treatment that was reduced by its rate to about a 60%, and then Gen Boost, and then standard seed treatment at the full rate plus Gen Boost on top. And overall, what we're seeing is when that standard seed treatment plus Gen Boost at the 100% rate has roughly 0.4 centimeter root length increase compared to the other two treatments. While this small amount of centimeters may not seem extremely impressive, for a young seedling that has just emerged in the field, that could be the difference between a healthy crop that's going to give a good yield and to be able to reach out to those nutrients that they need, compared to a crop that may be more susceptible to any pests, pathogens, weed competitors, or abrupt environmental changes that may inhibit it from becoming a lot more robust throughout the whole season. Now, it's a well-established fact that having healthy soil is directly correlated to the health of your crop. Now, this is not really novel, but there are many factors that can determine whether or not your soil conditions are going to lead to a good yield. So when it comes to assessing soil health, there are several angles that you can take in order to determine whether the soil is healthy or not. There are also many considerations of the soil condition that need to be considered before planting even begins. For instance, before planting, it's important to know that the soil temperature and soil moisture are at the levels that are needed in order to ensure that the plant is going to be able to start establishing in the proper environment, ensuring that the nutrient levels and the soil pH are at a good level, so that way the seedling and the seed have access to all the nutrients that they need in order to start that germination process healthy and strong. And the soil pH can also be very beneficial for activating and waking up that soil microbes. These would also include any of the beneficial microbes that can improve the overall soil and plant health. And some other things to note would be to check to see if the organic matter is at an acceptable level, so that way there is little to no soil erosion or any other soil structure issues, such as compaction or poor drainage sites that also need to be assessed prior to planting. So let's do a couple of case studies. So let's say we're getting ready to plant canola for the next year. What would those ideal soil conditions look like? Well, before planting, you want to ensure that the soil is at roughly 10 degrees Celsius, or for any Americans in the room, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That it's planted into a well-draining, non-compact, preferably clay loam soil, and ensuring that there are proper nutrients applied. Specifically, it's been shown that side-banding nitrogen and phosphorus seems to be the most effective for canola seedling germination and ensuring that the soil moisture is near field capacity during planting. So that way the soil microbiology and seedlings have enough moisture in order to begin that germination and start transforming some of those other nutrients into more bioavailable nutrients for the seedling to be able to take up. Now let's do the same exercise, but looking at wheat. Now, wheat and canola have very similar soil condition requirements, but there are a couple of slight changes. So for instance, wheat seedlings can be germinated at slightly lower temperatures, such as 4 to 7 degrees Celsius or 39 to 46 degrees Fahrenheit for soil temperatures. They can be planted into well-draining, non-compact silt loam or clay loam soil types. And the seeds can be applied with a standard starter fertilizer of NPK, but it's also been shown that a couple of other beneficial micronutrients, such as sulfur and zinc, can also aid in that germination process. And finally, one of the slight changes is that wheat seed is a little bit more sensitive to waterlogging, so ensuring that the seed is planted into a well-draining soil at planting is going to be ideal. Now, in the previous slides, we were mostly focusing on what can you do in the springtime or in the winter time when you're much closer to planting, but is there anything that you can do to prepare right now in order to be ready for the next season? And the answer is always yes. As Mark was saying before, there's always things you can do to be prepared for the next season. And one thing that can be focused on right now is helping with that crop residue breakdown in the field, so that way the soil microbiology has enough time to break down that crop residue into digestible, bioavailable resources for that upcoming season. So here on this slide, we are looking at the carbon to nitrogen ratio when it comes to residue decomposition. So for example, taking wheat, there's a 91:1 carbon to nitrogen, whereas in soybean, it's a 53:1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. So in general, a ratio of 24:1 is enough for the soil microbes to break down the crop residue without too much interference from the grower. However, as you can see from all of the ratios that are here on this graph, which are all very common crops that are grown up in North America or in Canada, they're much higher than that 24:1 or 24:1 ratio is presented here. So therefore, there is something that can be done by the growers in order to help be prepared for the next season, and that is utilizing any products that can assist in the crop residue breakdown in order to help jumpstart those soil microbes, as well as provide those beneficial nutrients for the upcoming crops. And that's going to be extremely important, especially since right now that everything is getting harvested. I believe, as Mark was alluding to before, wheat and canola is already off up in Canada, and soybeans and corn are hopefully going to be next. Potatoes probably still have a little ways to go before they're quite ready. But applying something right now while the weather is still good in order to help speed up that crop residue breakdown is going to be very vital into preparing the seed bed for the next year and for the next crop. So as we were discussing on that previous slide, one of the benefits of breaking down that crop residue is that you'll have a faster and quicker available bionutrients for the crops, as well as for the soil microbiome. In addition, breaking down the residue can also lead to better seedbed conditions. So when it comes to running your planter through the fields in the next year, there should be less interference and less damage that'll occur on the equipment due to improper residue breakdown. And from a disease standpoint, by breaking down that crop residue, you're eliminating the potential of pathogens from staying on the plant residue themselves and creating that green bridge that is talked about a lot in plant pathology. For those who may not be as familiar with the green bridge, it is a term and a concept where plant pathogens that are able to survive during the season in 1 year are able to stay on that crop residue or on some sort of an alternate host, live through the winter and overwintering, and able to attack the next season's crop. Thus that green bridge helping span from one season to the other. So another thing to look at when it comes to that proper residue breakdown is that you can also improve the soil structure by implementing in more of that organic material into the soil and thus helping reduce the amount of erosion that may occur on the topsoil. So there are quite a few products that are out on the market that can assist in the jump start of that residue breakdown. Many of these products are designed in order to feed the soil microbiome, but also while slowly working at decaying the tissue of that residue, thus creating a more broken down and almost a softer kind of feel to that crop residue. And this is done by reducing that biomass and prepping the fields for earlier and easier spring planting. As you can see in these photographs here, on the left, the picture of the grower standard, you can see that there's quite a larger amount of biomass within that crop residue. Whereas on the picture on the left, where roughly 2 gallons per acre of oceanic was applied, there's quite a bit less of that overall biomass as it's already began to break down. So the nice thing is many of these types of products can be applied on right after harvest over top of the crop residue and allow it to work before the first harvest and the first hard frost even occurs. By utilizing products that can help break down some of that biomass, you can see an improved soil bed condition. And some of that biomass you can also see is a great, reducing that biomass, is a great option for these growers that choose to follow a reduced till or a no-till system. However, this is not to say that these types of products or this type of practice can't be useful for those growers who choose to till their soil or happen to grow crops that naturally disrupt the soil structure. For instance, such as potatoes, sugar beets, and carrots, they all grow underground and need to be harvested by disrupting that soil structure and pulling it up and out of the ground. So utilizing products like this can also reduce any chance of that residue that may not have gotten buried under and can potentially harbor some of those old pathogens that may want to move from one season to the other. In the graph that's shown here on the right, you can see a reduction in the overall biomass in ounces compared from the grower standard at about 4.6 ounces to the 2.7 ounces of residue weight compared to the treatments in the oceanic applied at 2 gallons per acre. And that's a pretty good amount of a reduction that we're seeing when you're utilizing these types of products to break it down much faster. In addition, when it comes to the crop residue breakdown, it'll generally translate into an improved crop performance for the next season and an overall boost in the ROI. For example, when products are used to break down the previous season's residue, we can see that there are more available nutrients for the next crop, as shown here in this graph, where oceanic was applied to a post-harvest wheat residue at 2 gallons per acre and 1 gallon per acre compared to the grower standard product. And overall, what we are looking at in the y-axis is the canola in bushels per acre and this is looking at the residue breakdown of these products that are applied to the wheat, and then what is those particular plots when the canola was planted over, what was the yield gain from that next season. And overall, what we were seeing was that there was almost a 3.5 to a 5.5 bushel increase when we're using products such as oceanic to help break down that crop residue. And then another thing that should be pointed out is that the use of these types of products may also help the growers qualify for carbon credits or for any other soil conservation payments that they may be trying to strive for. So to recap, there are so many questions that the growers, seed treaters, seed distribution, and honestly anybody who's involved in agriculture needs to ask themselves before the upcoming planting season. And understanding the why behind these questions is a great place to start. Today, we talked about why it's important for having quick seedling emergence, the uniformity in your emerging seedlings, what signs to look for strong plant vigor, talking about the proper soil conditions for different types of crops, as well as explaining the benefits of properly breaking down the previous year's crop residue. By asking yourself and these growers these questions is a great way to get started and getting prepared for that next season. And while there are so many more questions that can be asked and explored in preparation for the upcoming year, these 5 questions that were presented today are a great place to start. However, it's always imperative that anybody who's involved in the planting process also do their own research into what they're going to be applying onto their seed or how they're going to be preparing their fields for the upcoming year. And that means that designing an integrated pest management programs needs to be developed and tweaked consistently in order to fit the needs of the grower. Proper seed treatment as well as seed application timings are going to be important, and knowing what products that you're going to be putting on top of your crop is going to help you understand and get a better and closer understanding as to what works and what doesn't work when it comes to addressing the problems and the needs of the growers. And there are many great products out there that you can use for your seed treatment programs, for in-furrow applications, in-season applications, post-harvest, and depending on what crop it is you're working with, it can also be very vital when it comes to post-harvest storage conditions or for food safety. Researching into these companies can be helpful in determining what products are going to fit and what's going to work with everybody's system. And here at Tidal Grow AgriScience, we're hoping to be one of those companies that'll be considered when it comes to designing and preparing your seed treatment programs, as well as your in-field pest management and fertilization needs. So those who may not be as much familiar with Tidal Grow AgriScience is the daughter company of Tidal Vision, which is based out of Bellingham, Washington, United States. It is a one-of-a-kind green manufacturing company where we are creating chitosan-based solutions from seafood byproducts in a zero-waste way that is not only sustainable for the environment, but also creates high-powered and efficacious products for the grower. Here at Tidal Grow, we have a variety of products that are also available in Canada that can be implemented into your IPM programs, your seed treatment, your fertilizer, and your soil health programs. And quite a few products we touched on today during the presentation. The first I'd like to introduce you to is Gen Boost. This is our ultra-low volume chitosan-based seed treatment that aids with boosting the seed germination, seedling emergence, and early root growth. Chroma is our plant health product. This can be applied in season and can assist in the improvement of the plant vigor, improve the overall quality, and boost the resilience against abiotic stressors throughout the season. And in our soil health portfolio, we have Oceanic, which is a 0.3 product, and CFOS, which is a 1.770 product. They are both fish hydrolysate-based products that are not only deliver bioavailable amino acids to enhance the soil health and nutrient cycling, but also help to activate and feed the soil microbes in order to improve the overall soil and plant health. So I wanted to thank you all very much for your attention today. And if you have any questions on how to get prepared for the upcoming season or any questions about the presentation that we went through today, then please feel free to ask. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. That was terrific. And yeah, Tidal Grow is pretty neat. I know I interviewed your president, Norm Davey,
Mhm.
back in March. Actually, hold on one sec. He was on our, anyone who saw our issue of Seed World Canada, Norm was on our cover. There he is.
Yes, sir.
And actually, it's Norm grew up on a farm, only about a 90-minute drive from where I am right now here in Manitoba. So
Mhm.
that was an interesting article to do. And I know you're talking about chitosan, and it's really neat because like chitosan is it's a chemistry. It's not a living organism like a lot of biologicals, and that can be a real advantage because it can stay stable. You don't have to try and keep it alive under tough soil conditions, and it's a really neat substance. And I know
Mhm.
I like to make my own wine at home, and I know when I interviewed Norm and he was talking about chitosan, and I didn't know anything about chitosan other than when you make wine at the end of the process to clarify the wine to make it nice and
Mhm.
clear in the glass, you add chitosan, and
Yes.
it serves as a clarifying agent. And obviously, the application in agriculture is much different, but that was kind of my first introduction to chitosan, and so to see how versatile the substance is was actually really neat.
Absolutely. And that's what makes our mother company so interesting. So, Tidal Vision is made up of three separate companies: Tidal Grow, Tidal Clear, and Tidal Tech. And each segment of the company focuses on different areas where chitosan can be utilized. So, like you're talking about using chitosan to kind of help pull out some of those impurities, that's a lot of what our Tidal Clear company is doing, using those chitosans in order to help pull out any sort of impurities from water. And then from the tidal agroscience, like you said, focusing on the agricultural side, but it is quite a versatile molecule for sure.
Yeah, I had a question. How you were talking about seed vigor earlier, and I had a question regarding how you measure seed vigor. Do you have your own methodology for doing that? How did that work in your testing, I guess?
Yes, absolutely. So obviously, it's going to depend based on crop to crop. But since we're talking about Canadian agriculture, a lot of what we want to look at is looking for that seed vigor, looking at that speed to emergence. So how quickly is it going to pop up in um, above the ground, getting some of those measurements by the day, looking at the overall root mass that's starting to build at certain time points is also a good period to look at, but then also doing some in-lab assays and just seeing how is the product affecting the actual seedling itself is also another way that you can measure that soil vigor or that seed vigor, excuse me.
This is an interesting one. How can growers balance yield optimization with maintaining long-term soil health when planning for the next season? Do you have any
Ooh.
advice on that?
That's an excellent question. And I think that's honestly one that so many growers are trying to focus on nowadays, especially now that everybody is really trying to focus on improving that soil health for many years to come. But I would say utilizing a variety of different products that can be both biological and synthetic, kind of playing with one another. So that way you know that something is going to be able to help with your yield, but is also going to be safe for the soil microbiome because we've barely scratched the surface into finding out how these beneficial microbes within the soil are affecting our plants and how a lot of the products that we're using can affect the overall balance within that soil microbiome. So, kind of, it's going to be a case by case scenario, unfortunately, but seeing what's going to be the best for improving that overall soil microbiome is going to be very beneficial. And that's going to take a lot of soil testing, assessment, and then a lot of repeat work over the course of time to see how are some of these different products playing well with one another and keeping that balance of that healthy soil microbiome at those levels that you need in order to improve that yield optimization.
Yeah, the microbiome, it's kind of like the human brain in a way. We've learned a lot about it, but there's still so much of it that is just, a mystery. It's really fascinating on how it
Absolutely.
works, and we're kind of learning more and more every day. And in terms of Gen Boost, you mentioned your seed treatment Gen Boost. I have a question.
Mhm.
Is it compatible with other seed treatments and enhancements?
Yes. So we've done quite a few compatibility studies in order to see how the Gen Boost tank mixes and mixes with other seed treatments, and we have not seen too many um, incompatibility issues. However, I always recommend for everybody to do some sort of a jar test before you use any new product, whether it's Gem Boost or any other product in general, especially if you're doing a lot of stacked approaches. Because especially with seed treatments, we use a lot of products that are just kind of stacked on top of one another. So you just want to make sure that you're not building your Lego tower, if you will, too high that it's going to topple over.
And what is the rate for Gen Boost?
So, and forgive me, it'll be 6.5 milliliters per 100 kilograms of seed. So if I'm doing my maths correct, that's going to be roughly 90 milliliters of total product for an entire tote or an entire seed bag.
And so how long between treating seeds and planting can you go before the seed treatment isn't as effective? Is there like a certain length of time where it's like, well, that's too long. It has to have to be within this window. How does that work?
Sure. Like when you're treating your seed and knowing whether or not that product is still going to be there is a really important question, especially if you're trying to pre-treat all of your seed and just letting it sit in a storage somewhere. From many of our studies, we have not seen a drop in efficacy. Um, when you apply the Gen Boost onto seedlings, you're not really, or seeds, you're not really seeing a reduction in the overall efficacy based on a certain period of time. However, that's not to say you definitely don't want to be applying seed treatment on your seeds right now and letting it sit for the next 6 months. But I always say the fresher that you can put that seed treatment on any of your seed and put it out into the field, the better it's going to be for all products. But as far as Gem Boost, there should be no concerns about reduction of efficacy and time of application.
Yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, as Norm told me when I did my interview with him back in the spring, that's one of the benefits of chitosan is that, not being a living organism, that can be a lot easier to work with that way as well. And no, thanks, Sarah. This is great. And as I said at the beginning of our webinar, this will be going on our website, seedworld.com/Canada very soon, so you can check it out there. And I'll also make sure I include a link to the cover story that I did with Norm back in March, so people can read more about Tidal Grow and the technology as well. So thank you so much, Sarah, for your time today. This was great. Thank you to our audience for spending your lunch hour with us. Like I say, this will be on our website very shortly, and I'd like to thank our sponsor again, Tidal Grow Agriscience. And thank you so much, Sarah, for your time. And you mentioned earlier before we went live that there were some rain clouds coming your way. Has it actually started raining yet?
Not quite yet. It's looking a little gray out there, but that's all right. And I wanted to say to everybody in the audience, I hope you have a healthy and happy and smooth harvest. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us at Tidal Grow. We'd be happy to help you with your upcoming season. And thank you so much again to Seed World, too, for allowing us to present today.
Thank you, Sarah. And yeah, happy harvest to everyone in your area and to our audience as well. So thanks, everyone. This is Mark Zinkowitz of Seed World signing off.